Okay, welcome to Chapter 8, Troubleshooting Hardware Problems. Alright, so we're going to be looking at different approaches to solve a computer problem relating specifically to hardware. Normally, we're going to be talking about just boot, so at the boot process. We're going to understand what post is and how it functions. We're going to look at how to troubleshoot RAM, processor, motherboard, power supply as it relates to boot problems. We're also going to be looking at hard drive issues and monitor/video issues. We're going to talk about how to protect a computer depending on its environment, because all of those are going to be huge concerns. So, how to approach a hardware problem. First, interview the customer. You want to include some basic questions. Describe the problem. When did it first start? When did you start noticing it? Was the computer recently moved? Is there any new hardware or software recently installed or updates installed? Was any software reconfigured? Did someone else use the computer by chance? Also, maybe ask about some history. Has the computer had the history of that problem? Is there any important data on the drive? Is there backups, or when was the last backup ran? Can you reproduce the issue? Can you show me what you were doing when the problem happened? After you gather, then prioritize. That way you can figure out if there's more than one problem, how are you going to tackle the individual problems? So the troubleshooting resources could be things like the internet, a higher level technician, previous tickets on the computer, and the manufacturing manuals for all the different components. If it's a Dell system, like a complete whole system, maybe contacting their technical support. If it's a personal built PC, maybe checking out the manuals for the individual components. So it's going to vary depending on the user and the environment. All right, so the first flow chart of the problem is begin the troubleshooting process at the very beginning. Does it boot into Windows? And that includes Windows Desktop. Are there any errors? And then we flow through the flow chart. Again, booting into Windows and it loading a user environment are two separate things. If you can get to where the users can log in, Windows has loaded. If you cannot get past that point, it becomes a user logon issue, not so much a booting Windows issue. Keep that in mind. Okay, on a computer that's not booting properly, we have to look at things like if the hard drive has important data on it. Uh, because that's going to depend, can we wipe the drive, can we not wipe the drive, can we move the drive to another computer? Uh, if we are having it connected to a different PC, we may not want to connect it to anything else. Like we may not want to actually put it in a cage or anything. We may just set it on the table and hook power and data to it. Maybe copy files to the non-boot drive so that the hard drive of the working computer can back up it. All right, so let's explain that one more time. So let's assume we have a PC that we have important data on that we need to copy data off of. We take it from a known good working PC that is booting. We put the hard drive of the non-working PC into the case of the PC that is working. That way it'll be shown as a secondary drive. You back up the data to the known working computer. That way you have a copy of the data before you start trying to repair or work with the damaged computer. Hardware monitoring, we're going to be looking at things like its power, its temperature, its fan. You have to understand that a PC operates with a specific voltage, so you want to make sure that you're getting around the appropriate voltage, normally 12 volt, 5 volt, and 3.3 volts. Here's an example. If we're booting off of one computer, we may actually have the second hard drive. So we're booting off of this guy right here. This is just a secondary. This is the known working computer. This is the hard drive of the not working computer. That way we can copy data off of it. We'll copy data from this hard drive to that hard drive. You can also do this via other types of converters. So if there's electrical problems, that can happen before the computer boots. Are they consistent? Are they intermediate? Does the PC appear dead? If you jiggle the power cord, does it come back on? Is the power cord plugged into an active outlet? When you verify the power cord is plugged in an active outlet and it is plugged into the power supply, do you notice a smell or a beep or any of the lights come on? Maybe you might. Does anything look burnt? Does anything smell weird? Is there weird whining? Are there any loose cables? Uh, if you are plugged into an outlet and the outlet's not working, may have to talk about, did you blow a circuit? If it is having power, is the unit itself overheating? Like, is there a temperature difference in it? Like, is it noticeably hot? Generally, intermittent problems are more difficult to solve because it's kind of hard to narrow it down. They could be symptoms of things like memory or components dying or a hard drive going out or even a keyboard. A great example, I have Windows 10, and occasionally if I'm in a Word document, I'll lose focus on it. And so I'll be typing and all of a sudden I can no longer type. I have to re-click in the document. It's a known issue with Windows 10, but trying to troubleshoot it's been kind of a pain in the ass. Shorts may occur if motherboard components are not connected to the chassis correctly. Again, they're going to use the shortest path. So we could actually have electricity flowing through cards the incorrect way. So again, we're looking for burnt blackness. We're looking for a burnt smell or just odd whining, things of that nature. Normally, if it's overheating, you're going to notice the system freezing or hanging. Maybe getting blue screens of death, the Windows BSODs. Maybe you stop hearing the fans running. The system is unstable. The things to solve the overheating issue is fans. We should be looking at not exceeding over, see this says 38 Celsius. 38 Celsius is about 100 Fahrenheit. Realistically, most BIOSes are set up to turn off at 48 Celsius or about 118, 119 degrees Fahrenheit. Depending on the component, they may run hotter or cooler depending on what you're purchasing. Dust in the cooler affects things. Notice how much dirt there is. Right there is a great example. That impacts the fan's ability to move air. So this process is getting hotter than what it should because the fan's not properly cooled. We can also look at things like the case fan. Is the case fan having a lot of dirt or dust? Does the PC have a case fan? All PCs should have them. They're going to be moving heat. There should be a front fan, a rear fan, possibly a top-mounted fan. You have to have the appropriate air cooling to move the appropriate air around your case. Normally you want cool air in the front, hot air in the back. Other things to help solve overheating, better airflow, better cable management to prevent the air from flowing appropriately. Make sure that we verify the cooler is connected properly to the processor with the correct amount of thermal paste. Also, things like open slots for air to escape. So we may not want that. You may want it. It kind of depends on your airflow setup. Normally, most people set it up so there is no area for the air to escape except where the fans are. Again, we go back to our appropriate photo, but you notice this right here is a huge cluster of cables, not very managed very well. However, if the air is coming in that way and evacuating that way, these cables do not affect airflow. These cables here would though. You want to make sure that you're doing proper cable management so that air can travel without resistance. Things to solve overheating as well. Maybe check the BIOS or hardware monitor to verify that things are overheating. Maybe you have a bad processor. Maybe you have a bad processor fan. Those are all big things. If you are still encountering overheating issues, maybe look at replacing the thermal compound or thermal paste and processor fan and or fans. Not all fans are created equally. Some fans move more air than the other. All depends on, well, how loud you want them, what you paid for them. So there is actually air volume statistics on fans. Like if you purchase a $2 fan, it may move 50 uh, 50 feet of air, where a $20 fan may move 500 feet of air. So it just kind of depends. You have to make sure you get the appropriate fans for the appropriate cooling. Here is some cooling. If this is the rear side of the case, this is the front, we'll have a fan going that way, and so that the air can exit that way. You may have more than one. Like here we have just the power supply. Here we have two exits, one entrance. That way the air will flow in, cool, brush over the processor, and it'll be sucked out the back through one fan here and one fan in the power supply. Here's another example of it. One fan in the power supply, one fan in the back. So you'll end up with two streams of hot air. If power is getting to the system but the screen is blank, what do? Maybe power off the unit, power it back on. Maybe the video card is not properly seated or the cable fell out. We're going to be looking at some of those. Maybe even turn off the PC and listen for beeps, even if there's slight beeps. That way we could see if there is a beep code for BIOS. Part of post will actually check the video. If you hear more than one beep, then there's a problem. Look up the beep code specific to your motherboard. Every motherboard is going to be different. In common, these are very common items. One short beep, everything is fine. One long, too short, maybe it's a video problem. A continual beep could be a memory error. You can read through them. They're all going to be dependent on your motherboard, though. These are very common ones, but again, I wouldn't trust them. Always go back to the documentation on your motherboard. So troubleshooting other error messages. If video and electrical system are working properly, are we getting any error messages on the screen? Common error messages could be CMOS battery low, checksum bad, memory size decreased, processor thermal trip error. That's saying, hey, the processor is getting too hot. Overclocking failed. Maybe no boot device or missing boot manager. Those are going to be Windows doesn't know where to load, or Windows doesn't know where Windows is stored at. The computer doesn't know how to load the boot manager. They actually boot into Windows. This is a error early on in the boot saying that it cannot boot the WinLoader. There are several things that the computer must do before it actually boots. We see it as a short, like 20-second, 30-second process, but in reality, there's a lot of steps to it. If the motherboard processor or memory is failing, you'll start getting random system messages. You'll start getting the system to become unstable, may hang, may freeze. You start noticing just weird things. We can always check the simpler things first, like maybe swapping out the memory, see if that works. If that doesn't, maybe swapping out the processors with a good processor, see if that works. If everything kind of works, some issues that you may want to look into is, could the problem be caused by a virus? Could it be caused by a memory module failing? Could it be done by a Windows update? Maybe malware? Maybe the computer is only accessing half the amount of RAM that it should be. You install 16 gigs, but it's a 32 gigs or a 32-bit system, so you're only really able to use 4 gigs, and so the system is becoming unstable because of that. Unlikely, but a possibility. Maybe check the BIOS to look for proper settings. Maybe get the newest version of your BIOS. Check the documentation for your motherboard just in case. Maybe do some online research to verify if anyone else that had the same motherboard that you have is having the same problem. That's always a big one. Are the onboard ports working? Is PCI or PCI Express working? Is the onboard audio working? Are the onboard USB functionality there? So there's some items. If we're suspecting maybe a hard drive or an overheating issue, maybe look at replacing them. Maybe not like buying a brand new one, but let's get a test hard drive in there, see if the test hard drive is having the same problem. If it's an overheating issue, try doing it when the system is cooler, see if it has the same issue. Look at the supportive paperwork for the computer you're working at to see if there's something that you can do. All right, problems with installation. First things first, keep things simple. Check all the power cords and all the data connections. If need be, unplug, replug in all power and all data. Open the case, check for new installed components. Maybe also restart the computer. Did restarting help? Maybe try removing all the new components to see if that will fix the issue. See if the case is getting too hot. Look at the temperatures. Maybe look at if a new component was added, maybe look at removing it and cleaning the connectors, putting it back in. If we're looking at installing a new processor, does our motherboard support our new processor? Does our motherboard need a BIOS update before it can? Those are all good common issues. Problems caused by a hard drive during boot could be a hard drive not found, or Windows can't be loaded, or things of that nature. File system on the drive could be damaged. Maybe files required to boot Windows aren't being loaded correctly. Maybe the boot configuration data is not functioning. Almost all of the software issues we've discussed in the software videos, so you may want to visit those just to be safe. If we're dealing with hardware problems that do show up during post power on self-tests, we're looking at things like the processor, memory, video, and the electrical system. So part of post, you could also, again, double check cables, connectors, make sure everything is plugged in appropriately. Check the manuals to verify things are plugged in correctly. Uh, if you're getting messages on your screen, what do they say? Can we pull that information to do some research? Are we using RAID? Is the RAID set up correctly? If we're looking at hard drives, maybe look at reattaching, reseating the cables for each of the different types, RAID, SATA, PATA, serial, just to double check. If a new device is going in, double check things like jumper settings. Not really important for SATA, more important for IDE and SCSI, just in case. Maybe look at the drive for damage. Is the hard drive making odd noise? If it is, then probably replace it. Look at the cable. Is the cable damaged? Is it not? If the problems still aren't solved, open the case and check other things. Maybe look at things like if we're dealing with hard drive specifically, reseat cables, swap them into different plugs. See if it gets Windows to boot. If Windows does boot, double check with Windows tools. If Windows doesn't boot, maybe take that hard drive out, stick it in a known working computer, and run some of the software troubleshooting on it. Because it could be that the hard drive is slowly dying and it's not good enough for the PC to boot off of. But booting it as a secondary drive may work. If your drive is whining loudly, buy a new one. If a bad power supply or a bad motherboard also might cause boot disk failures, because again, they provide the data and power, so one of those components could be going out. But if you suspect the motherboard, you'd start troubleshooting the motherboard. If you suspect the power supply, you'd be troubleshooting the power supply. But it's not always about the hard drive. It could be things like video. It could be things like processor. This is going to get way easier in time with experience, because part of this is trying to figure out the best way to attack a system, try to figure out what's really going on. If you're getting a video slash monitor issue, look at cables, look at is there power to both things. Easy things, maybe try replacing the cable. Maybe try swapping monitors. Maybe the monitor died. Is the monitor plugged in? Is the monitor turned on? Is the monitor having the correct video input? If all of those are good, maybe try a different monitor just to see if that works or not. You want to try to keep things systematic, and you want to try to keep things in an organized fashion. The monitor indicator lights on, but no images on the screen. Is the PC powered on? Is the power cable plugged in? Is the video cable securely connected? When the PC turns on, does the monitor even recognize the PC turning on? Is the appropriate power selected? Is the video card plugged in? Does the video card turn on? So all of these are big things when it comes to verifying that the monitor and or video cards are functioning. Big thing is keep things simple. Like if you're worried your video card is dead because the monitor doesn't turn on, maybe before swapping out the video card, maybe you swap out monitors. Monitor is easier to get to than a video card, so switch out monitors. Maybe test the monitor. Maybe open the case and reset the video card. For notebooks, maybe close it, reopen it. Maybe you might have to open the notebook to verify that the LCD monitor cable is plugged back in. Might also want to hook up an external video to a laptop to verify that the video card is still functioning. Those are all big things. Poor displaying could be a damaged cable, could be a frayed cable, could be damaged pins in the cable. Also could be a software issue, could be that the drivers are outdated. CRTs, they're old and ancient, but you may run into them. Maybe the cable is damaged, maybe the monitor is damaged. Realistically, don't spend a lot of time with the CRTs. If they're not working, double check video card, double check cables. If none of that's the cause, new monitor. Display settings make the screen unreadable. Power cycle the PC. You can always boot to the advanced boot option with minimal options to verify video settings. Since we're getting back to protecting a computer and the environment, you have to talk about things like ESD, dust and humidity, because all of that can lead to dirty fans, which could cause the PCs to overheat. So you don't want to move or dry the computer while it's on, because again, there's a lot of moving parts. We want to protect our PCs from ESD, so maybe have it on a good surge protector, and occasionally maybe check the temperatures. Your PC, depending on your area, should be cleaned out pretty regularly. Do's and don'ts. Do not use it at a high temperature or high humidity. Double check the BIOS to make sure settings are correct. Also look at temperature gauges. Maybe don't unpack or turn on a really cold computer because the quick temperature change could damage things. If we're dealing with blackouts, maybe want to have a UPS. If nothing else, make sure to have a surge protector. That way, if a power surge does occur, you have it. But if you're in an area where there's lots of blackouts or power outages, UPSs that can power your system for a little while are a good idea. Document, document, document. Keep really good records. How do we get rid of it? It's all going to be based off of your region. Normally, you can't just throw it in the garbage can. Double check what you're allowed to do with them. Does your PC have private data? You may have to do specific types of data removal before you can throw your PC away. Same thing you should do with any smartphone or any electronic device. You should make sure you have no private data on them by wiping them appropriately. Things like AA batteries or toner cartridges, there are specific ways to dispose of them. Make sure you understand the appropriate region that you're in and how to get rid of things like DVDs, inkjet toner or inkjet ink toner batteries. That way you can do it legally. That's actually it for this chapter. I want to thank you and hope you guys have a great day.